Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for today's BIM REC webinar series 9.0. It's always great welcoming new and familiar professionals to our new events. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Barie Hasib. I am the Managing Director of BIM REC. BIM REC are an essential BIM recruitment partner for individuals and organisations looking to really win with BIM. All of the team here at BIM REC are really passionate about helping our candidates, clients and the industry as a whole overcome any obstacles or challenges throughout your BIM journey by hosting events like these and providing expert resource for your teams. For future events, please do not hesitate to visit bimrec.com. I am joined today by David Frise. David is the CEO of FIS. David is presenting today on the 6 Ps of BIM. For those of you live on the event today, if you do have any questions, to the right-hand side of your box, to the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a orange rectangle with an arrow. If you click on that arrow, it'll provide you with a drop-down facility whereby you can ask questions, and I shall put them to David towards the end of the presentation. With that said, I would like to hand you over to David Frise. Bear with me, David, whilst I just make you presenter. David, now they should be able to see your screen. Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see that. Super.
Okay. Great. Well, I've never yet had the opportunity to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening in a presentation, but all of those to you, and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about BIM and the 6 Ps, and we'll find out what the 6 Ps are towards the end. But first of all, who am I and where have I come from? I'm Chief Executive of the Finishes and Interiors sector. You may not have heard of us before because we already rebranded at the beginning of April. And we actually are part of 2 organisations that came together, the Association of Interior Specialists, that's the fit-out and interiors industry, and the Federation of Plastering and Drywall Contractors, the FPDC, which is the drywall and plastering and heritage plastering. And for a short period of time we had the impossible name of AIS FPDC that won a lot of points in Scrabble but wasn't instantly recognisable. So who are we? We represent about 450 members in the UK. They don't only operate in the UK, but mainly in the UK, in finishes, fit-out and the interior sector. And we represent contractors, manufacturers and merchants. And we seek to be the voice of the finishes and interior sector. As far as BIM goes, we run an organisation called BIM for Fit-out. And the primary objective of BIM for Fit-out is to analyse and work out what will be the impact upon the fit-out sector of BIM. And that's a question we're still trying to sort out. And if any of you know the answer, we'd be very happy to hear it. So what is BIM essentially in this position? Well, we're really looking at, and I'll just lose that to the side, we're really looking at a digital representation of the building that we build and operate, crucially operate over a period of time. I used to be an M&E contractor for 25 years, and it caused me an immense amount of frustration when a site agent would say, well, let's look at the drawing in the office instead of probably going on site and seeing what the issue was. And there is a bit of a danger here that we do the same here. We're busy looking at the model instead of actually seeing what we've built. And there's some confusion, I think, particularly about those who haven't really engaged in it yet. There's a lot of terminology that people don't know, and most people are using the term BIM without, I think, really understanding how that will impact upon their business, and particularly as you get down into the SME sectors, but also within those major businesses, those major contractors, beyond those who actually do it. Who are actually engaged on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of talk about it, but what exactly do we mean? And of course, to many of us, it's pretty scary because it's change on a big scale and very rapid change. And we're not great at change as human beings. We're not great at understanding or participating in it, and that's not always good. And it can be a bit of an insoluble problem. This is a picture of Luis Suarez, if you don't follow football, a genuinely genius of a footballer, but a nightmare to manage. And when I originally did this presentation or something similar, he'd just bitten somebody in the Chelsea football team when playing for Liverpool and got a very long ban. He also happened to be their top scorer. And I thought I couldn't use it again. And then at the World Cup, he did it again. But he's still a genius of a player. And the thing about BIM is it's not just the technology, which I hope we'll come into, but it is for many people an unmanageable and an insoluble problem. And of course, to many SMEs in particular, it's in a foreign language and it's a bit of a roadblock. And therefore, they are kind of voting with their feet and saying, actually, nobody's asking us for it, so we're not going to bother. And the reason I give to that they're not being asked is that they've probably got this subliminal sign above their office door saying, we don't do BIM. Therefore, why would anyone bother to engage you if you've got this big message in invisible ink saying, we don't do this? The result is, or should I say, what is the problem we're trying to solve with BIM? And part of it is that the construction industry, and I'm talking specifically about the UK now, and I'm not sure how this applies outside the UK, but it's really a bit of a dog's breakfast. It's quite complicated, quite difficult. We don't work very well collaboratively, and the result is a bit of a dog's breakfast of a building, by and large. This is what we actually do, and this is why I think we need to change. Most clients have this kind of building in mind. I recall working as an M&E contractor for many years, that most clients were talking about exemplar buildings. I can't remember many that didn't want an exemplar building. They, by definition, can't all be exemplar buildings, I don't think. But this is the kind of thing that the client has in mind. And for those of you who aren't in London, that's where Boris Johnson, our Lord Mayor, lives, his office, and it's on the Thames, and it is truly an exemplar building. And we all like to win awards. So everybody says, wants to be in the Sterling Awards. That's me, by the way, in the middle, so I'm as big a hypocrite as anybody else. But on that basis, we don't tend to talk about what went wrong. We all want to win the Sterling Prize. We don't want to be there going, do you know what I commissioned, I designed, I built a pup of a building. So perhaps we need a campaign for real building awards, what really happened rather than what you tell us happened. So what do we do as an industry? Well, we design, and as far as I can see, we design as far as planning, get planning. And then we carry out this process called value engineering, by and large, because the thing that we planned we can't afford to build, and we assemble a series of products, and those products by and large are bought at the cheapest price, which is value engineering. So what we therefore actually deliver is something like this, except it won't look as weird as this. It will actually look like the building that was put in for planning. It'll be a facsimile of it. But if you actually strip it out, the building isn't the one that was designed. I'd rather like to be the lift contractor in this project, by the way. Well, how do we know this? Well, Carbon Buzz did a survey a few years ago and found that on average most buildings were about 1.5 to 2.5 times out on energy and carbon. The UK Green Building Council did a survey that said the typical building was about 200% out on design, from design intent to operation. So something is wrong there. And if you consider that energy is out, and that's something we meter, so by definition should be reasonably easy to monitor and meter, then if we're out on that, we must be out on things like acoustics, on smoke, on fire protection. We must be, because otherwise there'd be no explanation for the energy being out. In terms of our holistic integrated design, this is what we do back to our clients. So we promised them a Volkswagen Golf, and I know that's a Polo, but we promised them a Golf, and we deliver a Skoda. Now, most people at this point say, but Skoda's a very good car. It is, but it isn't the one that I actually ordered, and it has a different intrinsic value to it. Actually, I want the one that was designed, not the one that you've delivered. My background is that I started in submarines, in nuclear submarines in particular, and this has got the thing, secrets on it because we don't actually share information particularly well. But in this area, I wanted to talk about something that we did in a submarine, which I think is pertinent to that, and that's a thing called Granny's footsteps. So if you thought that somebody was following you in a submarine, one of the tactics you could use is to make small incremental changes in course. And that had the effect quite often of deceiving the person that was behind you until they weren't trailing you anymore because they'd lost that general, because of those small little incremental changes. So what do we do on site when we value engineer? Actually, we just do that. Each specialist or whoever on site just makes a small incremental change to the thing that they do. Doesn't matter if it's the drywall, if it's the mechanical, the electrical, the insulation, whatever, a small incremental change. So if everybody is doing that, that actually adds up to a substantial change. And I think that's where this big performance gap comes into place, because we are all making those small incremental changes that nobody thinks makes any difference. Why do we do that? Well, largely because that's the only way we can make a margin. In terms of supply chain, heavily fragmented industry, I think most major contractors would say, well, the supply chain looks like this. Okay, we're the big guy, but we're benevolent, we're funny. As far as most SMEs are concerned, it looks a bit more like that, a bit uneven. And one could even say it looks a bit like this. The contract, I think, gets in the way a lot. Certainly it does not help collaborative working, and that is an essential requirement of BIM. Any standardized contract always has changes, additions, addendums, and is pretty opaque and always has clauses within there that say whatever you do, basically whoever's taking out this contract is probably your fault. It's not something that encourages people to take chances or encourages people to do something that isn't in the contract. And often we're contradictory in those contracts, so we're asking you to do one thing while pulling you in the other direction to do the other thing. Of course, we haggle on price and haggle a great deal about price. And the lowest price, by and large, is the one that wins. If you don't put in the lowest price, you get the opportunity to match the lowest price. This leads to a degree of brinkmanship in that orders are placed very late, and that prevents proper planning. An awful lot of the design phase is spent during this haggling brinkmanship process. That always then leads us to time constraints. We're almost from the get-go up against a deadline that we have to meet. And therefore we are heavily focused on activity, and activity on site. And that, I think, drives behaviors, drives the way we operate. A member of mine who is a fit-out contractor recently described the current way we do business as he said, years ago, you occasionally would get a job, 1 in 10, where you'd have a real problem, and the main contractor would say, you need to get over it. He says the new norm is on every project, you need to get over it. And when you do get over it, everybody says, well, I always said you'd do that. But that's not really an efficient way to do business. Of course, because it does drive up costs, and it drives up costs because we're all very inefficient. We don't work in an efficient, effective manner. So I wanted to tell you about a bit of building work that's been done to me recently, and I don't mean that I commissioned it. It was on my property. It was actually on the adjoining property to me. It's not a small thing. It's in North London. It's a sports centre. Local council own it. The project is about 8.5 million and was supposed to be 6 months long. I should have finished last summer. If I tell you that today they craned off the contractors' cabins, you've probably got an idea that this is not run entirely to plan. And if you look at that photograph, it may start to give you a few clues as to what the site was like. When I knew that they were going to build next door to me, I looked at the planning application, and frankly they could have been building this because there was so little detail in the planning application. I mean, almost nothing, just a couple of drawings, and those were not much better than sketches, with enormous amounts of detail to follow, like acoustic reports, nothing on the M&E really, and this was almost all M&E. In that there is a new plant room being built, air handling unit. So the level of detail on which this gained planning permission was, shall we say, flimsy. The net result was that they started on site and immediately delivered lots of equipment and materials to site, and it very rapidly deteriorated into this kind of condition. So this is what I've been looking at out of my window for the best part of 18 months. Which doesn't leave me best pleased, as they say, but it also indicates a degree of lack of planning, I think. But it was a considerate constructor program. For those of you outside the UK, this is a program designed to improve the image of the industry by setting standards of how you deal with your neighbours, how tidy the sites are, how you impact upon the neighbourhood around you. They didn't really help me in this case a great deal, and I don't think they've taken that many signs down for people who failed to actually be a considerate constructor. And I'm talking here about things like early starts, late finishes. Apparently emptying a skip at 6 in the morning is not a construction activity. I might argue with that at 6 in the morning, but apparently it isn't. And I would say that by and large, they were a bit like this, looking through the telescope with the wrong eye. To give you some more illustration, where's the problem here? Is it the skip or the hole? What came first, the skip or the hole? What I can tell you is that this digging of a hole stranded many of the assets of the project on the wrong side of the hole, so they couldn't actually do so much of the stuff they wanted to do, and they certainly couldn't empty the skip, so it got bigger and bigger and bigger. What do you do if you can't fill a skip? You get a bigger one, of course. And if that doesn't work, you add another one again. And you can see the general level of tidiness on this site. They had outside messing. There was food everywhere. A fox moved onto site because he loved it. And generally not a very pleasant neighbour. And inefficient. I talked about it. You'll have seen one of the earlier photographs showed a bunch of breeze blocks. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever really looked at a building site without being involved in the project itself. And I've got a pretty good view from the first floor window. I've always been involved in it before now. I've always been either part of the problem or within the trees. So it really is different when you can just stand and look at these things. But if you notice the breeze blocks there, you would have noticed them the other side of the skip earlier. And then they moved to this position, then they moved back here, then they moved over there. How many movements of materials did we have on this site? Now, and why? Well, why? Because they were paid for them, because they got them delivered to site first up. Again, an indication of how we really aren't working efficiently. And by the way, that's another skip. I counted 6. And it's not a big site, only 8.5 million project, for goodness sake, 6 skips, which tells you a lot about waste from the site. Well, why am I banging on about that in particular? All those photographs were taken from a footpath, and that footpath led to the local school, senior school. So all those potential entrants into our industry were walking past this every day and forming the view, along with their teachers, that this probably isn't the industry for me. I was probably forming the same opinion myself. So what do we do? Because this is not construction as I would like it to be, and it's certainly not construction that most people would like it to be. I believe we've really got to turn the world on its head, and I think this is where BIM comes in, because it is the opportunity for us to do things differently. The government, that's the UK government, have some very clear objectives, what they're looking for from construction. And one of the big ones is, of course, lower costs. And that's not difficult to see that up to 33% reduction in cost could be achieved if we started to work more efficiently. And 50% more delivery. If we're not moving breeze blocks around site, surely there's a better chance that actually we could deliver the building quicker. And add to that, lower emissions and improvement in our export targets. But it's about collaboration, and it's all those things that we looked at before from the contract through that probably are not helping us here. The government UK BIM task group, I think, have done a great job in developing a framework in which we can operate using BIM. And it's a process. It's not about the technology. And the thing that many of my members, and some of them are SMEs, are worried about is that what technology should I buy? What should I do? And in fact, we're involved in a project at the moment called Bid for Free, which is partly funded by Innovate UK, which is the Technology Strategy Board, to come up with a free 3D modeler that allows our members to look at the model, whatever the software package is, and to return a tender without increasing their costs significantly. We all know there's no such thing as a free lunch, but bid for not very much is not quite as catchy as bid for free. So we're stressing to our members really is a process and a language, and if you can learn the language, you can understand the process, and you can come with an open mind and some energy and some can-do attitude, it will get you a huge amount down the road. There's certainly our members who are the larger contractors, such as ISG currently chair the BIM Fit Out group. They say that actually what they really want to hear is people who are willing to learn and help them on the journey, because they don't know everything yet. Who does? So the more collaborative and open to change we are, I think the more successful we are likely to be. And within the essential components, I really like this model because it actually shows that significant proportions of this are about how we operate the building. No point putting the building up using BIM if we then continue to operate buildings inefficiently. We must really take the dividend from a good model and use it to operate the building efficiently over the whole life of the building, so we get whole life costs reductions, not short-term capital projects. And I think this is the key to me to where a contractor in particular, but also manufacturers, will make genuine savings. And that is where we have a common data environment and a common data understanding and use. So all those areas around where we're getting clear definitions, and we understand exactly where information is going to appear, what format it's going to be in, and when we are expected to deliver that format. So we've cut out that toing and froing of, no, I didn't mean that, I meant this, or why have you done that when I meant you should have done that. All those areas that the ambiguity is taken out. If we look at it and we say that BIM is a process, then effectively what we're doing is reducing value, non-value adding activity. And in fact, I would go as far as saying that many of the activities we do in construction are really value destroying activity. And the ability to have certainty about information and data, when and how it's going to appear, is where contractors and manufacturers can start to make significant savings, because they're not wasting time making small adjustments because it's a different site, or maybe large adjustments because it's a different site. So it is about collaboration. And as we said, the UK government are requiring 3D BIM on its projects by 2016, about a year away. How does this fit into the bigger picture, though? And I think BIM is really only a manifestation of the digital revolution, known as by many as the third industrial revolution. And what I want to pick out here is really, it's not only about technology, but it's the rate of pace of change of technology. How things change much more rapidly than they used to. So a couple of years ago, when I did presentations, I could ask people who had heard of 3D printing. Maybe a couple of people in the audience had. Now everybody has, and in fact you can buy one from Staples. So the time from the idea coming into the market to it being commercially available on products and services has rapidly decreased and will continue to do so. So the rate of pace of change is what I'm looking at, and of course it's not just it rapidly morphs into other things, and quite often, and this may be true of BIM, quite often the thing that you thought some technology would help solve isn't the thing that is the major benefit. If you look at the mobile phone, texting very rapidly became something that people hadn't really considered, and yet we've moved on from that. If you don't believe me, then look at Nokia, who were the largest capitalized company in the world just a few years ago and got completely wiped out on the handset market. But then again, they've come back, because last week they were bidding for a very large US or rather French company, and they've moved, but they've had to move and shift the market they're operating in significantly. So the dangers of ignoring this, I think, is what I'm trying to point out. It fits in with big data, with smart cities. And what I see here is that actually this is the coming together of the built environment, utilities, transport, and IT. And this is an opportunity and a threat for construction, I think, because the utilities industry, I don't think, really understands the built environment, and I'm not entirely sure that the IT industry does either. But that makes our people, I think, highly attractive to these industries, because in order to build these smart cities and to integrate these things, the skill sets of many of our people are really attractive to adjacent markets. So I think this is a huge opportunity, because we can take the lead, as we should, but the danger is that we won't. Back to the government. So the government want 33% savings. And they have this, I think, image of what it's going to look like and how how models are going to produce beautiful buildings instantly. And actually, I think they're going to be able to tell that you've sold them a putt much more easily through the soft landings program. That's a post-occupancy evaluation program in the UK. And things like the Internet of Things, where you live in a world with more sensors than people, then actually it becomes easier to work out that actually the thing you built isn't the thing that I asked for. So I think there's an opportunity again there, and the danger of not building the thing that's designed. And we're going to do this with the supply chain still in this mode. That's a challenge if we're going to deal with the performance gap. And that, I think, is the big prize. That's the big thing we should be doing. Because the consequences of failure to deliver on that are that everybody's out of pocket. That's not just the client, but it's all the contractors, the manufacturers. We're all out of pocket because we're working inefficiently. This is the final thing on what the industry does to us. Actually, the building next to me is being renovated, but I actually live in a new building, a new block. And this is how little the builder, and it's one of the nationals, so it's a big company, cares about the user. Can you spot the time clock here on the system? It's actually fitted inside the door jamb. And when I said, well, that's impossible to read without twisting around, and some of the residents in here are in their 70s and 80s, I was told it's positioned discreetly for my convenience. It's moved now. But that lack of thought, lack of design intent, that lack of concern is something we should be worried about. So if I compared it to anything at all, I'd like to see something like the Civil Aviation Authority. And can you imagine the Civil Aviation Authority working as in the way that our planning authorities do, for example, and saying to Boeing, okay, I know you haven't fully designed this aircraft, this Silverliner. I know it's only sort of 50 or 60% designed, but why don't you take it down the runway and see if it takes off? Because it might. But that is actually how we start most of our buildings, with very, very little design detail in place, and therefore we are always in build and design mode, and that's not good. Can you imagine an aircraft that actually has a boxing in or anything of that nature? And then I found this, the Nimrod, but that's not a good example, I think. So the solution, well, I think the planning department have a very big role to play here. And I've put this as, I think this is from Hong Kong. I may be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But the planning, and the point here is that if we don't do this, someone's going to do this for us, by the way. If everybody says the car industry is a perfect exemplar of a connected industry, but they forget that in the 60s and 70s, British Leyland, Morris, all those companies were a disaster. And it was actually companies coming in from overseas that radically revolutionized the way we build cars. But back to our planning departments. I think the role of the planning department here is to say to clients, okay, you can have planning permission, you can have certainty of planning permission for this building you want to put up, but you can't actually start till you have, I don't know, 80% of the design complete. And that's audited by someone outside of your design team. So that you don't get into this build and design mode, you actually have the thing you're going to build designed pretty much there before you start, so you work more efficiently. Otherwise, or because, not because, in terms of why should they do that, not because we love the construction industry, but actually we'll rank bad neighbours. We truly are terrible neighbours. In the borough that I live in, which is Haringey, 70% of noise enforcement complaints are on construction projects. That doesn't really bode well, and that's an indicator, I would suggest, to actually really bad neighbours. So it needs, I think, new ideas, and I guess there's only one list. It's all been photographed, so I hope you're not going to be able to take too much of this away. But I would say my recipe is build what is designed, not what you can get away with. And by that I mean that's what the market actually almost forces people to do. And it drives behaviours. If you don't care about what you building what you can get away with rather than what's designed, why would you care about your product selection? Why would you be happy to substitute inferior products? And why would you care about the person who's going to install it and the skill set they have? Are they the right person to do this? Do they understand what they're going to do? And indeed, why would I bother to pay them promptly? So this is a bit of, I think, we deal with almost everything by putting a plaster over the symptom instead of actually getting to the core disease. And I'm not having a dig at contractors here, because I think actually clients hold an awful lot of responsibility here, because whatever they do, it would appear, particularly in London at the moment, but whatever you do to the building, it doesn't matter whether there's a great building or a poor building, the asset value increases regardless. So therefore, why would you really care about something that's going to cost you a bit more? Of course there are notable exceptions, but the wide feeling is that, you know, whatever you do to the building, it's going to go up in value. And what we effectively therefore do is con the citizens of this country and the taxpayers, because we make a contract, do we not, when we put a planning application in, we make a contract with the local authority and therefore the electorate to say, I'm going to build that building in that position and it will be like this. If you build something different and it is 200% on energy usage, that means me as a taxpayer, me as a citizen in this country, I have to go and build more power stations to give you the energy to do that. And that's what I mean by conning us as citizens. But up until now it's been very difficult to actually recognise that and find out about that. But I think it will become increasingly easy for clients to do that and for councils to do that, because there'll be a model and you'll be able to see more easily how that building is actually performing to design. So, to sum up, revolution is coming, the digital revolution, and you need to be prepared for it, I think. Within the industry, we need to be sat at this table, and I think there's a misconception that the construction industry runs the construction industry. I think the property industry runs the construction industry, the other way around. More often than not, particularly as specialist contractors, which many of my members were sat at this table, not the other one. And the 6 Ps, proper planning prevents poor performance. Thank you for listening. I hope people are still there. It's most odd to actually talk to an audience you can't see or hear, but hopefully someone's there with some questions.
Well, certainly are. Thank you, David. Thank you ever so much. Yeah, fantastic presentation. Superb analogies as well, by the way. All right. Okay. So, questions. Do you want to take a quick sip of water first?
Ready to go when you are. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. David, how are you encouraging trade manufacturers to register BIM product data in a reputable library for contractors, designers to access?
We actually leave them to make their own choice on who they're going to use for that purpose. We are, though, heavy supporters of product data templates, which is the CIBSI base scheme, and ARAP are also heavily involved in that. And the BIM Fit-Out group sit on the steering group for that. And that is to effectively produce a generic product data template for each sector, in effect. As BIM for Fit-Out, we've said we will coordinate the production of product data templates for the interior sector. So we've done one for ceilings, partitions, we're working on one for operable walls, there's raised access flooring, and any of the others around fire doors or those, then we go to the relevant trade association and say, do what we've done, which is bring together a mixture of manufacturers, contractors, anybody else who wants to take part, and actually come to a common agreement on what do we mean by. And that was an interesting exercise. We started with ceilings because we had all the major manufacturers within membership, and it took 3 sessions to work out what do we mean by a ceiling, what do we mean by a ceiling tile, how are we going to assess the acoustic data, all of those issues. So I think it has a double benefit, one of bringing actually people who would normally not come together to work out a common language for this thing, and then it also then delivers something of use to the industry.
Sure. Okay. Fantastic. How the LOD's processes can be stimulated across the project so that much time is not wasted during the elimination of the errors?
Level of detail is interesting, actually. One of the groups that I sit on is BIM for Building Design, Building Services, which is all the major M&E contractors, people like NG Bailey and Skanska, Langer Rort through Crown House, people like that. And what they say is that they're getting kind of spurious levels of detail too early on in the project, that they don't need as much detail to kick off with, and the danger is that you actually you put too much detail in you don't need, when actually all you want is how big is it, where's it going to fit, have I got decent crossover points, is it the right size for the project overall.
Sure.
What they're telling me is that they get landed with projects that have been designed in great detail, done huge amounts of clash detection. Then the client realizes he can't afford it, but all that design time is gone, and then you're starting again, but you're actually already on site, and then you're immediately into building design.
Sure.
So I think level of detail is important, and it really is. We shouldn't get too tied up in this sort of increasing granularity. You need the real granularity, I think, probably at the end.
Okay, fantastic. What is the best BIM execution plan working effectively?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know because I think I said at the beginning that everybody wants to win the Sterling Prize, and I think it's pretty similar with BIM. very few people will tell you privately, but they won't come out and say, actually, I'm on a project that's a complete dog and here are all the details. So it's very difficult to assess, I think.
Sure, okay, fantastic. How deep can metadata go towards generating contracts, information, cost plans, logistics and programs, etc.?
Well, I would hope as we get more and more used to using the programs, that actually becomes more and more useful. Again, the danger is, I think, of it that you take out that does that make sense element into it. Are we, the computer says, nah. You've got to make sure that what you're putting in is the right information, otherwise it's rubbish in, rubbish out. But I would hope it will massively help people program and cost projects much more effectively. Interesting, I can remember when CAD kind of first came in, and clients changed the way they operated at that point. So because they knew it took us a long time to turn around drawings, they didn't make that many changes. But as soon as they worked out that we could do them quite quickly, they said, "Oh, could you give me 3 options or 4 options or 5 options?" And suddenly all that time we'd saved had disappeared, because instead of doing 1, we were now doing 3 or 4.
Okay. And what steps do facilities managers need to take to ensure that they are engaged early enough on projects that their requirements can be conveyed to the technical design team?
Well, that's the common problem, isn't it? That the people who actually operate the building and maintain the building come on board and they find that they can't maintain it. And I don't have the magic solution to that. I do know that I think it would be exceptionally helpful if all the CAFM software actually talked to the BIM software, so that we had an automated process of inputting data. I think we're still in a position where people are taking model information out of BIM and putting it manually into a CAFM system, and that can't be right. So I'd lobby your supplier to say, look, you really need to integrate these two.
Sure, fantastic, thank you. What if the project owner themselves are unable to accept the truth of proper planning and making changes to the project along the way, while the project site is also carrying on with the works without proper communication?
Well, I think that's what I've described today. I don't think clients ever do have a realistic, well, that's not true. Of course, there are exceptions, but some don't. They have totally unrealistic project. I think the one I described that side, a totally unrealistic program with the amount of detail they had. That's why I'm suggesting planning departments take it out of their hands.
Sure.
And you hold the client accountable. It may be the contractor's fault, but the client's accountable. I think it's their building at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we've been much too, I think, willing to roll over on this instead of saying, actually, no, you cannot do it. Because whenever you go to tender, somebody says, well, you can't do it 6 weeks, they can.
Sure.
And it can't be done, and then they've 12 weeks later they still haven't finished, but the job's gone.
Sure. Oh, fantastic, thank you. Which type of clients are employing BIM managers to oversee and manage the BIM process?
All kinds, I think. But I would hope that this is a temporary phenomena, in that I think there are a couple of groups of people who are pretty concerned about digitization and computerization of the functions they perform. Basically anything that can be computerized will be, or computated, shall we say, will be. There was an interesting article in The Economist a couple of weeks ago that said that even doctors, their initial role is probably a computer is the best person to diagnose you initially.
Wow.
Because they don't have to have seen it before. They can probably now, if that applies to doctors, then do we need a QS to do numbers? Actually, they've got a different role, a changing role, I think. And therefore, it's where do they add value in a different way? I'm not really convinced it's through the BIM manager role. And I would hope that everybody becomes so familiar with it, and it's the way of doing business, that you don't actually need one. It's just the way we do business.
Sure, fantastic. Well, we have a couple of And our next events we've got are on BIM FM and BIM QF, so there's some interesting questions to put forward there. One other question as well, what are the current examples and stakeholder experiences with the BIM process, and what are the lessons learnt?
I think I sound a bit like the Prime Minister in saying I refer to my previous answer. I think it's really difficult. People do come together in the groups, actually, and the BIM for Building Services group is a particularly good example of where you have examples of things that have gone well and examples of things that haven't gone well. But there's a reluctance within construction period to share bad information. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
You know, no client wants to say, look, I've actually commissioned a PUP, do they? And no architect wants to say, actually, you know, I got that really badly wrong.
Yeah, sure.
There are a few brave people out there, but most people don't. They just go up and accept the prize and say, yeah, everything was wonderful.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, if there are any other questions, please, I'll give people a few seconds. If people want to contact you further, David, is the email address on the screen the best one to get hold of you via?
Yeah, that's good for me. I'd genuinely be interested in people's experiences and how they are finding things happening and challenge my thesis. You know, it's just something that has come together by looking out my window, quite literally. And I don't just spend the whole day looking out my window. You know, I do some work in the evenings maybe, but it just seemed so obvious looking at it from afar. Why on earth are you doing it that way? It's madness.
I'm sure your view out your window doesn't look nice. I must admit. Yeah, crazy
slowly
project.
improving.
Huh? Crazy project.
Slowly
yeah,
improving.
I'm sure you could suggest some contractors. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, is there anything else that you would like to add? Well, from my point of view, I'd like to say thank you, David. It's been great. Thank you ever so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I'm fine, thank you. If you check out our website, if you'd like to find out more about our organisation, and indeed BIM for Fit Out, and if you are in the Fit Out, Finishes, Interiors sector, then come along to a meeting.
Fantastic.
Be delighted to see you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, David. And from my point of view as well, and all the guys here at BIM REC, if we can help at all, resource any candidates, strong candidates or clients, please don't hesitate to contact us. With that said, thank you ever so much, everybody, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Barie.
You're more than welcome. See you soon. Take care.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.